Good morning, everyone. It's going to be almost impossible for me to match the excitement in the room when you guys talk about taxes, when I talk about digital. So apologies ahead of time, because clearly I'm not going to get anywhere close to the kind of energy that we've seen in the room for the last 20 minutes or so. First of all, I'm delighted to be here. Mr. Bhargav, distinguished members of the dais, leadership of India's automotive industry, and members of the media. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to have us here. I want to thank FADA as well as Amit from CarDekho for giving Google the opportunity to join us today and share with you some of our perspectives. I guess India must be changing, because I was looking at all the distinguished leaders on the dais and asking myself, as Google, what on earth am I doing on this dais? So I guess internet must be now actually getting to be at least in your consideration set as you think about running your businesses. What I'm going to do very quickly is talk a little bit about what's happening with technology around the world, how that's beginning to impact many industries, including the automotive industry, and then I'll talk about India and what we're seeing in terms of internet user growth, but more specifically what we're seeing on in India in terms of how consumers are changing their behavior when it comes to buying cars, researching cars, buying cars, etc. The title of my presentation is "The Future is Now," but as all of you know, being from the technology industry, for us the future is always now, right? Because the future keeps changing every single day. So let me start with where do I point this to? Can you? Okay. Let me start with this one slide, which I find to be the most compelling slide when we talk about change and how consumer behavior has changed over the last century or so. You know, one of the things we look at is how long it takes for a new technology paradigm to be adopted across the world, right? And one of the things we look at, and especially as Google, being a global company, one of the things we look at is how long does it take for something to reach 1 billion consumers around the world. So the first line that you see, sorry for those of you on the dais who can't see these slides, that's actually, that's basically landline telephones, okay? It took 110 years for landline telephones to go from being launched to reach 1 billion consumers around the world. The second line is actually television, and that's black and white television for all intents and purposes. So from the time that black and white televisions were launched to the time it took for black and white televisions to reach 1 billion consumers around the world, it took 49 years. The next line is actually phones, but not the kind of phones that most of you are probably carrying, but the kind of phones you were carrying 20 years ago, which is essentially voice phones. It took 22 years for voice phones to actually reach 1 billion consumers. The next line that you see is the internet. It took 14 years from the launch of the commercial internet for the internet to reach 1 billion users. And the final line that you see there is actually smartphones. From the time that smartphones were launched commercially, it only took 8 years for smartphones to reach 1 billion consumers. So there are two interesting things you look at this slide and you take away. The first thing is it's taking a significantly lower amount of time for massive scale adoption of new consumer paradigms, right? So my view is, if you look at like sort of the next big thing that's going to happen in our industry, which is wearables, right? Whether it's smart watches, whether it's smart, fitness devices and so on and so forth, it's going to take a lot less than 8 years for the next paradigm to actually reach 1 billion consumers. And the reason I like sharing this with you is, as businesses, we always think, whether you're in the automotive industry or any other industry, we always think that technology is changing too quickly. Well, we have good news and bad news. That's absolutely right. Technology is changing very, very quickly. But the bad news actually is the pace of change of technology is only going to accelerate. So I think as I look around the room, most of you are probably going to run your businesses for the next 20 or 30 years. I see a few faces. You'll probably run your businesses for at least 50 more years. Because the reality is, all of us will live to be over 100, thanks to what's happening with genetics and genomics. So this is actually only going to accelerate. So, right, the faster you actually learn how to adapt your businesses to changing technologies, the better off it's going to be. Now, in terms of where we are today, around the world, there are over 7 billion people in the world. 3 billion of them are connected to the internet today. We're in 2015, actually we're in 2016. Within the next 5 years, by the year 2020, 6 billion out of the 7 billion people around the world are going to be connected to the internet. Today, of the 3 billion people who are connected to the internet, on average they're spending between 2 to 3 hours connected to the internet every single day. I want you to imagine a world where 6 billion people, essentially 85% of the worldwide population, is connected to the internet and spending 2 to 3 hours a day online. And what that could mean in terms of how the internet could change their lives, but also what that might mean in terms of how that would impact your business. Now, what does this mean in terms of businesses? Over the last 20 years, what we've seen is any business where the product is what I call a digital product has been completely transformed and disrupted. This particular slide is actually looking at revenue from the music industry. How many of you still buy CDs? You know, remember, like 5 or 10 years ago, you used to buy CDs? Anybody in the room? It's okay, you can raise your hand, that's all right. Right? You know, it was actually only 10 years ago that we used to buy music in CDs. Nobody buys CDs anymore. Actually, I have like this really amazing CD player, and my daughter, who's 10, has no idea what it is. And she's only 10. She's like, what is that thing? And what does it do? Right? So this actually looks at what has happened to the music industry over the last 7 years. The red line is music that used, you know, the way that music used to be distributed. CDs. The revenues from a CD-driven music industry in the year 2008 was $20 billion. Last year, that number was $7 billion, and the current estimate is by 2020, that number is going to be 0. In a period of 12 years, we've seen an industry that's gone from over $20 billion of revenue, and by the way, this is US statistics, this is not global statistics. In a period of 12 years, that's gone from revenues with over $20 billion to basically an industry that, you know, that part of the industry that doesn't exist. The actual yellow line that you see is downloading music, you know, one-on-one, right? I don't know how many of you actually get music from the, you know, the Apple Store or the Android Store. That's sort of what that is, right? So that industry virtually didn't exist. In the year 2015 was actually about $7 or $8 billion. So an industry that actually virtually didn't exist 7 years ago has caught up with what used to be the largest way in which you distribute music. And the most interesting one is actually the blue line. The blue line is streaming music. How many of you actually get your music now streaming? Ghana, Savan, you know, pick your favorite. Okay, very few, right? The streaming music industry was not born in the year 2010. That was 5 years ago. 5 years ago, the streaming music industry did not exist. Look at where it is in 2015. It's a $5 billion industry in the US. And look at where the crossover point is. By the year 2018, an industry streaming music, which didn't even exist 5 years ago, is actually going to be bigger than the CD-driven industry. And the reason I like to show this slide is because what has so far happened in industries where the product is digital, music, books, any, you know, gaming, is this. Industries have changed very, very quickly. One of my favorite brands when I went to college in the US in the 90s was called Tower Records. Actually, that's not even in the slide because that's actually a previous decade. You know, in the 90s, the way you got music is you went and bought records, and there was this brand called Tower Records. By 1997, Tower Records was out of business. So this is actually very important because what we believe is over the next 20 to 30 years, digital and connected consumers will begin to impact physical industries where the product is not a digital product, right? First to go will be banking. The minister actually talked about the 23 banking licenses that were issued. Banking is fundamentally you're dealing in a digital product, right? Whether it's a loan, whether it's a checking account, money itself is a digital product. Banking will be the first to get impacted. But over the next 10 to 20 years, we believe that many, many different industries where the product itself is not digital will get impacted in a very profound way by the internet. Now, in terms of automotive industry, you all know how your industry will change a lot better than we will ever know. But some of the interesting things that we're seeing is, for instance, you know, how software can actually reinvent traditional industries, right? All of you, I'm sure you've either read about or you've looked at videos of the driverless car, and if you've been in California, in Southern California, you've seen vehicles like this driving around. The reason I like to put this up is not because of the driverless car, right? The reason I like to put this up is it is a glimpse of what is likely to happen as software gets a lot more powerful and therefore is able to impact what I call physical industries. What's really happening today? Software is getting very, very powerful. Within 15 years, computers will actually be smarter than people, right? That's called deep learning, machine learning today, moving on to deep learning, right? What's really happening is software is getting to be very, very powerful. So you compare software with world-class sensor technology and hardware, all of a sudden, you've got a machine, in this case, a car, that can actually drive better than a human can. So that's really what this is. Let me show a video. Some of you may have seen this already, but let me just run this.
Today, we have something extra special for you guys, and you guys will be some of the first people outside of our team and outside of Google to ever drive it.
No steering wheel in the way.
It was a big decision for us to go and start building our purpose-built vehicles for this. And really, they're prototype vehicles. They were a chance for us to explore what does it really mean to have a self-driving vehicle. But in the small amount of time we've been working on it, we have functional prototypes, and it's exciting.
It was really cool. It was like really kind of a space age experience.
We're like,
You said, relax. You don't have to do nothing. It knows when you to stop. It knows when you to go.
it actually rides better than my own car.
Yes.
What she really liked was that it slowed down before it went around a curve and then accelerated in the curve. She's always trying to get me to do it that way.
That's the way I learned in the high school drivers.
So if I had a self-driving car, I could spend more time hanging out with my kids or helping them with their homework, even just tending to them, finding out how their day was and not having to wait till you get home and have dinner and all that. So it'll be good.
Human feeling of it is very well engineered and it is very smooth. There's nothing that makes you feel the least bit threatened. It's impressive. I'm totally in love with this whole concept.
Our lives are made up of lots and lots of little things. And a lot of those little things for most people have to do with getting from place to place in order to connect and do things, be with people, go places that they need to go and do things. And so there's a big part of my life that's missing, and there's a big part of my life that a self-driving vehicle will bring back to me.
This is the first step for us, and it's really exciting to see the progress we've made. The opportunity for people to just move around and not worry about it, it's going to be incredibly empowering and incredibly powerful for people.
I love this!
You know, cars in 20 years are not going to look anything like this. We all know that, right? That's not the form factor that, that we'll have. Cars in 20 years will actually be made mostly by the same manufacturers who are here today that I had the privilege of being in the dais. But they will actually be a very, very different consumer experience. And I think the reason I like showing that is because it shows what software, as it gets more powerful and more capable, can actually do to an industry, and especially what it could do to your industry. The other interesting thing is how the consumer experience, right? So that one is, the ultimate change of a consumer experience, right? I used to drive a car, now I don't need to drive in the car, I just get into the car and it kind of drives to wherever I need it to go. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, because what we actually believe will happen is that the entire consumer experience is going to change. So let me now show a video. This is actually Android Auto that some of you may be familiar with.
cars are integral to the way that people live their lives today. We use cars for taking our kids to school, we use our cars for commuting to work, but when we look at cars today, they're fundamentally disconnected vehicles.
People don't want to check their phones at the door when they get behind the wheel. So we partnered with auto manufacturers and technology partners to figure out the best way to bring Android into the car. Today we're announcing Android Auto, which extends the Android platform into the car. Android Auto combines the best of both worlds. You get the connected apps and services on your smartphone with the physical controls that were optimized for driving in your car. We had to go back to the drawing board and really take an experience that was designed for a smartphone and break it down to its bare essentials.
We focused it down to the features that the user really needs within the driving space. We've made Google Maps really easy to use for the car. We've got nice, easy to access touch targets and a simplified interface. The voice technology that we're using within the car is super conversational.
Your hands are on the wheel, your eyes are on the road.
Set a reminder to get gas on the way back to work. Pick up my dry cleaning. Remind me to get tickets on the way home.
Google brings you just the right information at just the right time. So when you set reminders while you're driving, your phone will remind you later on, even if you're outside the car. Android developers will soon be able to create entirely new experiences for the car.
We're really excited about this opportunity because for us this is really very much at the beginning. And we're really going to go on a long journey with this.
So as you can see, the consumer experience is going to change in very fundamental ways. And what I can tell you today is none of us sitting here can actually imagine what those would be. What we can tell you is it's going to be very, very different, right? And it's going to really start and end with the consumer and what the consumer would like to do. Now, the other thing that's actually going to change, given all this technology and the fact that consumers are now actually living their lives on the internet, is as every player in a value chain, so let's say as car dealers, you actually need to think about how are you going to engage with these new users. The reality is all your consumers will come into your dealerships at some stage. But I think actually even today in India, and you'll see some of the India statistics in a while, a lot of them would like to engage with you without having to come to the dealerships. So let me now give you two examples. We'll run through these very quickly. They're not from India. We'd love to actually share more India examples of what's happening with dealerships and how they're bringing the dealerships to the consumer. It's not about the consumer going to the dealership, but it's really about how the dealership is coming to the consumer. So let's run this.
Which car do you want to know better?
Hi, I'd like to see the Fiat Cinquecento.
Yeah, sure. I'm here to show you any Fiat model.
You will talk live with one of our 12 experts. And this device is your eyes. Tailor-made design to stream two-way audio and point-of-view video in real time.
And what other wheels do you have for the Fiat Cinquecento?
Wheels? Check it out.
Great. Do you have any other colors?
Colors? Yeah, of course.
Live every day from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. After that, you can close the purchase at the nearest dealership. And if you don't want to talk, you can follow another user's conversation, or even get to know the car's main features through tutorial videos. Fiat Live Store, the biggest auto innovation of the year, is not a car. It's a brand new business model.
So I like that example because it really shows what you can do with technology that exists today, right? Why does a consumer have to come to your dealership? Why don't you take your dealership to the consumer, right? And we'll talk in a minute about how many Indians are actually online and what they're doing online. Let me now share one more example with you. Let's run this.
At Audi, innovation has always been at the heart of everything we do, and we understand that trust and transparency are important to you. That's why we've developed AudiCam. AudiCam is a revolutionary way of showing you what work needs to be carried out on your car. Every time your car comes into a center, we give it a free health check. And if our technicians find something on your vehicle that warrants attention, we won't just tell you, we'll show you. Our technicians film your car in the workshop and show you in detail the problem that we've identified. We'll text you a secure PIN number and then email you a link to the film which can be viewed on any device, including your mobile. The technician will then explain to you the work which we recommend doing.
We've found that your front brake pads are 100% worn. This is what a new pad will look like, and we would advise replacing these today. Thank you very much.
If you want to proceed, you can simply authorize the job there and then with confidence at the touch of a button. So whether you're at home, in the office, or on the move, AudiCam gives you a unique perspective, the likes of which has never been seen before in the automotive industry. AudiCam, another industry first from Audi.
So, you know, this is one of the most, as all of you know, one of the most important, or I should say one of the most painful consumer experiences, right? Where you take your car to the dealership, you want to get it serviced, and then it kind of goes into, I know you all think it's actually a great experience, but talking as a consumer, it kind of goes into this zone where you have no idea what happens. So it's a very simple idea. You give every consumer the option to actually know exactly what's going on and then follow the experience. Again, very, very simple experience that you can create with technology that you have today. Now, let me quickly run through where we are with India. In India, we have over 350 million internet users. I think the only thing you should keep in mind is any Indian who's going to buy any car in your professional careers is already online. Now, if you really want to invent a car that's going to cost 3,000 rupees, what I can tell you is they're going to be online by 2020. So they're already online, and anybody who's going to buy a car in your lifetime is already online. But if you're going to invent a product that's going to cost a couple of thousand rupees, actually what I can tell you is by the year 2020, they'll be online. So a large number of consumers are currently online. Now, what's interesting about these consumers is they're doing a huge amount of research about the kinds of products and services that we want to buy, right? When we think about the internet and consumer experiences on the internet, what we think about is messaging, social, search, video, entertainment, things like that, right? Well, actually, for your industry, what's really important is this number. 75% of car buyers research online for their car purchase. Today, the first step that they take in the first step of their consideration journey or their research journey is actually go online and doing research online. So 75% of car buyers actually research online. 54% of Indian car buyers change their consideration set after online research. So 75% do research online, but after they start researching, half of car buyers change their mind on what brand they want to buy, what model they want to buy, and guess what? Which dealership they'll probably want to go to. And we'll talk more about that. So this is really, really important because if you're not there, if you're not engaging with these consumers very early in the game, it is very likely that you will be in the 50% that they decided to move away from. And guess what? Dealerships are also being researched extensively, right? 33% year-on-year growth in dealer searches. So consumers, what's interesting, what we've seen over the last 5 years or so, it used to be they would search only for brands, then they would search for different type of cars. But over the last several years, what we've also seen is consumers searching specifically for dealerships. And I'll give you some examples in a minute. And guess what? Those searches are growing very, very rapidly. The reason I like to share these numbers is just to give you a sense of the kind of consumer activity that is happening on the Indian internet today in your category. These are some of the, I know there are a large number of you in the room, so I don't mean to actually not include many of you, but we thought we'd just pick some of the names, right? The top search dealers in the audience. Pratham, Krishna Hero, Sundaram Motors, and so on. So these are some of the top search dealers actually in India. Now what's very, very important, whether you're one of these brands that are up here or any brand sitting in this room, I'd encourage you to take out your smartphone, search for your brand. Just take out your smartphone, search for your brand. And just tell me what you see. Let me tell you one thing. If you're not found by that consumer when they search for your brand, if you're a dealer, you basically missed the customer. It's as simple as that, right? That's the first step. When consumers are looking for you, you should be there. And ideally, you should be obviously trying to target all consumers that are actually in the consideration set of buying a car. Not surprisingly, with the growth in mobile in India, 1 in 3 searchers for dealerships come from mobile devices. And this number will only increase. In many categories now, we've seen that more than 50% of consumers searching for products and services actually searching from a mobile device. And consumers are actually going online, not just in the, what I call the upper parts of the funnel, right? Which car is the best? These are sort of what we call micro moments, right? Consumers go through a journey where they have lots of moments in their purchase cycle. Which car is best moments? Is it right for me moments? But what we are also seeing is that consumers are spending a lot of time around the 3 moments that matter to you as an auto dealer, as an auto OEM, right? Where they're selling cars, bikes, what have you. Can I afford it moments? Where should I buy moments? And what about servicing moments, right? And what's very, very important is that you own these moments, because these moments are yours, and owning the moments will make the difference between you're getting these customers or not getting these customers. In the last 30 minutes, last thing I'm going to wrap up with is in the last 30 minutes, in NCR, in Delhi NCR, so this is not India, this is just NCR. In the last 30 minutes, there were 1,200 searchers for car dealerships. 1,200 searches for car dealerships in the last 30 minutes, only in Delhi NCR, okay? And there were 1,700 car servicing searchers, consumers looking to service their cars in Delhi NCR in the last 30 minutes. And what I'd like to leave you with, were you there? Simple as that, right? The internet is here, it's at scale, but the reality for businesses is consumers are always about a decade ahead of businesses. Consumers always get there. You saw the first slide that I showed. Where we are today is the consumers are there, they are looking for you. And what's very, very important at a very basic level is that you be found by the consumers who are looking for you, and then you engage them in a very, very significant way. Thank you again for having me, and wish all of you have a great day.